Hey there, Internet friends, and welcome to the 8th episode of the first season of That Ultimate Video Game List show. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey from ThatNerdySite.com, and this is a show where each season, me and a panel of friends try to create the ultimate top 20 video game list with two main bits of criteria. Only one game per franchise, and only one game per console. Joining me on this first season are three of my fellow nerds from That Nerdy Site, Logan Wilkinson.
How you doing?
Doing alright, how about you?
Doing okay.
Alright, we have Cameron Abbott.
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
And we have Frank Bazzani.
What's up, nerds?
What's up, everybody? You can find the show each week on podcast services and on YouTube. Please rate, review, like, and subscribe everywhere you can to help us conquer the algorithms. We are almost at 100 subscribers over on YouTube, so if we can reach that milestone, we'll be able to actually secure youtube.com/thatnerdysite and make ourselves a little bit more visible. So please subscribe over there if you have not already. If you really enjoy the chaos you're about to hear, you can support us over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, and we would always appreciate that. The way the show works is like this. We began by taking turns adding games to our list until we reached 20, and last week we settled on games 20 through 16. We've been ranking them now. Today we will determine games 15 through 11 on our way to determining the best game of all, which will be retired to the Hall of Fame at the end of the season and be ineligible in future seasons. So last week, as I said, we landed on games 20 through 16, and those games were, at number 20, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, number 19, Mega Man 2. Number 18, Logan's wonderful choice of James Bond 007 Nightfire that nobody else has played. Number 17, Pokemon Soul Silver, and much to the chagrin of Cameron. And number 16, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Both of those, or all five of those games being Logan's or Cam's picks exclusively so far. Games still remaining to be ranked that we will start to dive into today are Persona 4 Golden, Final Fantasy VI, The Last of Us, BioShock, God of War, Super Mario Galaxy 2, Mass Effect 2, Portal 2, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, Earthbound, Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, Tetris Effect, and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. So that is what we have to go. So let's dive in.
Time to crack open a cold one, boys.
He waited.
See, you didn't do it at your introduction. And
I never do it at the introduction on this show.
I feel like you do.
You definitely do.
I feel like he did too. I'm with you guys. I thought he didn't do it.
Yeah, whatever.
Well, fair enough.
It didn't
we'll
come,
call it
and I was so
surprise.
excited. My heart filled with joy. And then you have shattered it again. So let's.
Now you
based
know
on-
how I felt last week. That's exactly how I felt last
Well, I
week.
was going to give you another chance. So based on where we're at with the list so far, I think last week we kind of tackled most of kind of the crew's bottom of the list. But I know we still have some options out there. Some of them are just ludicrous, like Cameron's. I know your still reigning bottom game on your list is Wind Waker.
100% still is.
So what is everybody else looking at? For me, the one that I have that is currently the lowest that we have not yet ranked still remains Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 as the only other game outside of Nightfire on this list that I never played. So that's where I'm at. Logan, how about you? What's your bottom of the list?
When I refigured my list, 15 for me is Tetris Effect.
Okay.
I think I like Tetris Effect a lot. Again, we're at the point now where, like you said, I don't think there were ever really any bad games on the list, but now they're all really good games or better. But for me, it's just the one of I don't have the emotional connection the Tetris that Cameron does.
Yep.
I think Tetris Effect is a great game. I think it's one of the best kind of Tetris games after Dr. Mario. But I think for me, I would have it just kind of at the bottom by just a hair over the next few games above it.
Okay. And how about you, Frank?
For me, I'm totally in the same boat as Logan and kind of agree with what he said. I think it seems like a great game and I definitely enjoy it. But for me, it's just kind of with everything else left, that would be kind of the next bottom one.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like that's where we left off last week. That's kind of the
that
direction
too.
we were
Yeah,
heading
no,
in.
I'm going with Trevor. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
Oh, okay.
Ooh. Cameron's reversed it a week to
Cameron-
think about it, and he
that's-
changed his mind. Yeah.
Cameron did make a comment on That Nerdy Site show, which goes live tomorrow as we're recording this, that he's gonna try and hold his ground a little bit more on his last 2 games remaining. I think so. Makes sense that he would want to hold off fighting against Tetris Effect.
I mean,
right
his other game will last for a long time. To be fair, that one's pretty safe. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
So okay, so it sounds like we're kind of at a crossroads between Tetris Effect or Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 as what will be next on
15.
the list. So
I feel like in this way too, we've also, in a way, maybe determined what 14 might be as well. Whichever doesn't win here will probably be the next one gone.
yeah, I would agree with that. So help. We talked, I think, a little bit at length last week about Tetris Effect in the
Yeah.
debate between Tetris Effect and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So Logan and Frank and Cameron as well, because you've played Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, kind of help try and sway me over to why Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is better than Tetris Effect.
It's not.
Yeah, for me at least, yeah. For me at least, I think it is, in a similar manner to the kind of made for Nightfire when I nominated it. I think it's reflective of the kind of the fun and the joy and kind of the goofiness of that kind of late PS1, PS2 era of games that did just have so much kind of joy to them, I think. Aside from the fact that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 and 3 are legitimately some of the best sports games I think made. Like, they're so good at what they do. They're so much fun. They're so enjoyable to play as an actual like gameplay system. I think grinding in the game, I think doing tricks, I think unlocking characters, I think the maps in 2 and 3 are both fantastic. I think that
But we're talking about just 2.
I know that we're talking about just 2, but I think it works so well on so many levels. And I think that Tetris Effect is, again, like, I think these are both great video games. Tetris Effect is one for me, at least personally, where it's just not, I just don't love Tetris in the way that Cameron does. I can't speak to that, right? And, like, Trevor and Cam don't love, obviously, Tony Hawk as much as me and Frank do, but I think that the legacy of the Tony Hawk games in terms of that era having kind of a place in so many people's hearts. And, like, I know that a retort that Cameron's already writing down right now is that, like, well, Tetris is Tetris. And it's like, yeah, but Tetris is different, right? Like, everybody's played a Tetris game, but most people don't love Tetris in the way that I feel like Cameron does or like Alex O'Neill does, right? Like, most people like Tetris. I like Tetris, but Tetris wouldn't be in my top 100 games list of all time. Like, it's a fun game. Whereas I think there is a rabid, if small, but a rabid fan base of Tony Hawk fans out there, and I think it is very kind of a defining series in a lot of ways for kind of people of me and Frank's age. I think those games are just very well crafted, and as a final point, I would just say the music in Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is so good, and also such a great introduction to so many classic like rock bands and like 90s bands and like rap and hip hop, and like it is a great, genuinely great soundtrack that series has throughout its run, and particularly in 2. And so like that's an open kind of case I can make for Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Frank nominated the game, so he can obviously speak at nauseam about it as well.
Does your real quick, Logan, before we step away from you, does the fact that it is nominated here on the Dreamcast color your distaste for where this game would go on the list? Because this would be celebrating the Dreamcast as effectively console number 15.
I think no. I think, I mean, like, the Dreamcast is shit. It's the worst console on the list. But I think it's still a thing of, like, I think Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is a great video game still. Like, irrespective of that, right? Like, I think there can still be great video games on really bad consoles. Shout out to the Ouya having at least 1 or 2 great games on there. And so I think that's my answer ultimately. Like, what the Judge Effect is on the PSVR. Like, I think I would argue neither one of those are necessarily heavyweights of consoles, like the VR extension and Dreamcast. But also, like, I think ultimately for me, the most important determinant is how good the game is, and I think Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is a game again, going back to that test, that I would rather ultimately sit down and play over the course of like a long weekend than Tetris Effect.
Frank, how about you?
Logan, for me, hit the nail on the head on pretty much kind of like everything I love about it, and definitely how I feel, even like all the way down to the music. Like
Yes,
since
that
we've
music.
been since we've been talking about it so much, and it was even on my mind a little bit beforehand. Like I went back and was listening to the soundtracks. I even played it a little bit the other day,
It
and I just
slaps.
like
Yeah, it's real good.
the soundtracks are amazing, and I didn't even realize how many bands that I just listened to as bands that are still like I realized like, oh, they're on the soundtrack. This would have been the first time I ever heard this.
Yeah, exactly right.
Which
yeah.
band? Like what bands?
The one that really struck out to me was Lagwagon, but I do know there is more on those soundtracks as well.
Ace of Spades. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then even totally with like Rage, I was listening to Rage Against the Machine too, and I was like, oh, this
Absolutely,
would have
yeah.
been the first time I ever heard Rage
Yep.
Against the Machine. They're like I really like do enjoy those soundtracks, but to get even away from that, just back to the actual game, I did think they are just amazing with how they nailed the gameplay. It holds up to this day for people who
Yeah.
love the series, and people you could just pick it up and you'll just get it. It just works, like it makes sense. But there's a level of depth there that you can just dive into and really get down to, and you can start putting out like 5 million point combos, and you can do like you can see a speed run of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 where somebody beats the entire game in 20 minutes, and it's all in like one combo, and it's insane. And like that's the level of like technicality that's also there. Like it's really there's a lot of depth there in terms of it being a game. And another thing I would want to touch on too is in terms of like replayability, you're just constantly unlocking stuff. Like yeah, you're going back to some of these same levels, but you get new levels, you get new stuff for Create a Skater, like you get new skate decks, you get the behind the scenes videos. Like so you beat the game with Tony Hawk, you get his skate video, and you get like behind the scenes of Tony Hawk, and then same thing for every other skater. And like I think that's something that's really insane. And you can even I believe Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 was also the one where you could unlock Darth Maul.
It was either 2 or 3 for sure, but yeah, one of them.
I'm pretty sure it was 2. And that's another thing going just continuing with the unlockables is that there's a bunch of amazing hidden secrets in there for every single one. Like I believe Pro
He was
Skater
in number
2 was
3, not 2.
It was in 3? Okay, so I retract that. I retract that. But there is unlockable characters in all those Pro Skater games that are amazing. And that's one thing I think is great is that you want to keep replaying it constantly because it plays so good, but they're giving you something for replaying it constantly.
Okay. Let me go ahead and put out a couple of things here. First off, I want to say that by no means is the Tony Hawk series a bad series.
No, again,
I
all
think-
the games left are
Right,
really
but
good
let
games.
me let me go ahead and keep going. One thing I want to point out is that like a lot of Logan's argument is he kept slipping in 3, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, and I
I
understand
don't think.
that.
I think that's.
No. I just want to
bit
make a point
disingenuous.
here. I want to make a point here. Those two games came out very close together. They are very much made by the same development team. There's a lot of carried over assets. There's a lot about that because it made that move from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2. And so when they created the assets for like they basically moved the assets over and retextured them and did a lot of work. They were two games almost built together. They were so close in development cycle. So I understand why you slip into to referencing 3. I just need to make sure that we put this on a point here. Here's the thing that the kind of the craw in my throat when it comes to this is that between 1, 2, and 3, I think that 2 does a great job of improving things from Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1,
Sure.
but it also starts to move towards a much more Activision, like an Activision-focused feature set of lists and things that Activision would want from a hit game. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 was a big leap and a big risk for Neversoft and Tony Hawk himself. There was a big push behind it. So there's a lot about Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 that does feel... I mean, you start off that game playing in an underground, skate area. I will say that there are some really good tracks in Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Also, Logan, you mentioned Ace of Spades. Ace of Spades is in on the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
It's in 3, but we were talking about 2 and 3 when we were talking about that soundtrack.
Right. So let's talk about the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 soundtrack. Blood Brothers by Papa Roach.
It's a great
Bring
song.
the Noise by Anthrax and Public Enemy.
Also a great song.
Guerrilla Radio by Rage Against the Machine. The first great song, I would say, on that album. Pin the Tail on the Donkey by Naughty by Nature. You by Bad Religion, which I would say is another slap.
Yes, yeah.
When Worlds Collide by Powerman 5000, total slap.
Absolutely.
No Cigar by Melon Colin. B-Boy Document 99 by the High and Mighty. Cyclone by Dub Pistols. May 16 by Lagwagon. Subculture by Styles of Beyond. Heavy Metal Winter, consumed by the EP. Consumed is the band. Evil Eye by Fu Manchu.
Mm-hmm.
Out with the Old by Alley Life. And 5 Lessons Learned by Swingin' Utters. Let me read to you the soundtrack list from Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1. Police Truck by the Dead Kennedys. Vilified by Even Rude. Superman by Goldfinger. Jerry Was a Race Car Driver by Primus. Screamin' Nothing to Me by Speed Dealer. Psycho Vision by Suicidal Tendencies. A New Girl by the Suicide Machines. Here and Now by the Ernies. Eurobarge by the Vandals. And Committed by Unsane. A smaller track list. Mm-hmm. Every single one of those slaps. Every single one of those is a banger. That is not the case for Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Additionally,
I think if your point that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 isn't the best Tony Hawk game is irrelevant. Like, all that matters is if it's better than Tetris Effect, right? Like, I don't think Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is the best Tony Hawk game. I'm very clear about the fact that from the beginning I've said Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 is the best Tony Hawk game, just objectively. But like, I think Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is still better than what Tetris Effect did. Like, that's the comparison. I don't give a shit where it ranks in the Tony Hawk Pro Skater series. That's irrelevant to me, right? Like,
that's fine, Logan, but I want to make a point here.
Experience. I think that's a more enjoyable thing. Like,
cool.
You're getting you're starting an argument about different, like, a whole other set of games. Like, I don't care where like it ranks. Like, I think to make the argument that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 is better because it's not Activision-fied is silly to me, because Activision in 1999, 1998, A, isn't the Activision that exists in 2018, 2019, and B, I think perpetuates the myth that, like, Activision is some giant scary boogeyman. Activision is not the fucking devil. They're not the worst company in the world. And that's also something I'm just kind of a little bit exhausted by, right? Like, tell me why Tetris Effect is better than Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. That's a conversation I want to have. That's a debate I want to have. But, like, I don't give a shit about Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 in the context of this debate and this conversation. That's relevant to me. I don't care about that.
Cool. I don't give a shit about Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 in the relevance of this context.
I'm not making that relevant. I want to talk
You're
about
the one that brought it up.
2.
Why did you bring up Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3?
Both these games are great is what I said. Like, I think to make...
That's great.
I think I mentioned that both these games are great. Like, I think... Because, again, when you get to Tetris Effect, you're going to mention other Tetris games. And you're talking about that series and its legacy and its impact. And that's fine. I did the same thing with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, and so did Frank. But I think, like, I'm not arguing that it's the best Tony Hawk game. You're going to argue that Tetris is the best Tetris game, which is fine, which is fair, which is probably true. But, like, I think you can still talk about these series and these impacts of the series as a whole when talking about the game, the impact they've had in the video game industry. I think the impact of Tony Hawk Pro Skater series in the video game industry is big. Is it bigger than Tetris? No. But I think it's a better game than Tetris Effect is, right? Like, I think when we talk about Zelda later on, and we're talking about GTA later on, when we talk about Mario games later on, we're going to talk about these series as a whole as well. I mentioned other games in Tony Hawk Pro Skater series, but we're having a conversation about Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. I think that game is more enjoyable to play. I think it's better gameplay. I think it's got a better soundtrack, and I think it's better unlocked systems and better replay value than Tetris Effect. That's my argument. Why is Tetris Effect better is what I want to hear from you next. I don't want to hear anything about Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1. I don't give a shit about that.
Cool, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. What do you guys say?
Cool. I'll put it this way. And this is where I'll stop talking about Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 and start talking about Tetris Effect. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 isn't the best Tony Hawk game. And the fact of the matter is that the Tony Hawk series isn't as good as the Tetris series. It's not on the same level of impact. It's not on the same level of... Well, Logan, you also kind of made that part of the argument for me, so let me go ahead and put it and start moving along in this. Tetris Effect is a better game solely because it has the ability to... Sorry. I need a moment.
Real quick, while you're kind of capturing your thoughts. So, for me, as the person on the panel who has not played Tony Hawk, the thing that I've always heard about Tony Hawk is, like, the soundtracks are amazing, and as we went through those lists of songs in either game, in any of those games, I was like, okay, I recognize like two or three of those, and this is like at the peak time where I would have been listening to that kind of music the most. Like that is my like listening to The Edge 1039 like alternative music in high school kind of thing. And so like the fact that I didn't recognize more of those songs or didn't and you know, I might recognize a couple more like if I hear them compared to just like the band name and the song title, but I was like I was underwhelmed by how little of the soundtrack I actually recognized. So that's the thing that jumps out to me is like, and I'm not even like putting that up against, you know, Tetris Effect, which I think is certainly isn't going to have a more recognizable or iconic soundtrack compared to like licensed music from the late '90s. But that's the thing that jumped out to me was like, oh, I don't like as somebody who for the last you know seemingly 20 years has heard like Tony Hawk Pro Skater soundtrack is like so great and is like one of the best you know game soundtracks of all time. I was like, I don't recognize most of this stuff, and so it's like that's the thing that leaps out to me right now is oh okay. This one thing that has been put up on a pedestal for this game series for so long just like doesn't seem like it has earned it so much as like the looking back at it through rose-tinted glasses, which I think we do for a lot of games on this list, I'm sure. But for that in particular, like that's the thing where I'm like, okay, was it really that great of a soundtrack, or was it just it hit the moment at that moment in time for a lot of people, and it's because it's one of those things that like your taste in music tends to basically be what you're listening to between like 15 and 18 or something like that. Seems to be kind of that's what people carry forward with them into adult age. I remember there was I want to say it was Pockets Full of Soup that Jared Petty did with Damon Hatfield, where they talked about that, and like that's where people's music tastes really get locked in. And it seems to me when I hear about people talk about Tony Hawk Pro Skater's like musical relevance and resonance, that it seems to be because it hit people maybe during that time of their lives where that's the the taste in music that they were listening to, and that's what has carried forward to with them into this day and age, as opposed to someone like Damon Hatfield in that example was like constantly trying to seek out and find new music, even as he has gone well past that era of his life. So I guess that's the stream of consciousness thought that like struck me as I
Yeah.
listened to that soundtrack of games.
I think for me, that's not untrue, but I think it's part of what me and Frank touched on a little bit is that like I think part of the joy of that soundtrack is that there are a lot of games that you might, or there might not be a lot of games that you know, but is that thing like discovering bands you hadn't heard before, like discovering songs you had heard of before, right? And like I would also say that like neither me nor Frank were 15 to 18, right? Like we each would have been like 6, 7, 8 years old when these games came out, and like we still, again, that was a gateway into so many of these songs. We didn't know any of them at the time, and I think the way it allowed us to get into that kind of genre of music, right? Like I think the soundtrack is good because it allows you time to just like actually listen to the songs back right when you're skating out there and just playing again and again and again. It just like it sinks in because a lot of sports games, every sports game has music, but usually the music is playing just when you're in like kind of the menu scene, and when you go into the actual game, it's the game sounds and noise and kind of the environment that kind of echoes all around you. And for Tony Hawk Pro Skater, that's not the case. It is just the music that is kind of constantly playing. So you just hear these songs again and again and again, kind of can develop a kind of rhythm, I think, for them and a love for them and a kind of better understanding of what these songs are, and they can sink in, I think, more for you. But I think it is definitely if you don't love a certain genre of music, then yeah, you won't love the Tonic Persecutor soundtrack. Like it definitely is like a soundtrack for a certain subset of people, maybe. But I think the same can also be said for Tetris Effect, where it's like its soundtrack is great. I think we'd all probably agree with that, but also for only a certain subset of people, right? Like it's a very particular soundtrack in the same way that I think Tonic Persecutor 2 is a very particular genre of soundtrack and music. But I also give way to Cameron's argument for Tetris Effect now.
The biggest point I'm going to make here is that it's incredibly hard for me to talk about this game objectively because I can't really.
I want to throw this out there because Logan's used like Tony Hawk 3 is objectively better. Like none of this is objective, guys. Like let's always remember
Yeah,
that
no,
like we're
I
always
know.
talking about art. Like this is always a subjective conversation. Like
But even under a subjective lens, like it's hard for me to be fair about Tetris Effect because
It's your favorite game of all time. Like that's the thing. Like
yeah,
it's your favorite game of all time.
it is. It's my favorite game of all time, and for me to say that, like, if it was up to me, this game would be number one on my list, no doubt. And it's not just that it's my favorite game of all time; it's that I've never had the kind of experience that I've had while playing Tetris Effect doing anything else. Tetris Effect to me is soulful. It is like it's borderline like prayerful. As somebody who grew up really religious and isn't religious at all in their life anymore, there's a certain like the things that Tetris Effect has evoked out of me are things that are really only really put into context in for most people in like a religious aspect. It is that dear and special to me, so it's hard for me to say and compare it to Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, which is a game that is fine. Like it's beyond fine. It's a great game. It's one of the like we put it on our list for a reason. I didn't veto it the first, so it should also be mentioned. I vetoed it when Frank brought it up the first time, but I didn't veto it because it's not a great game. And I said it as much then. I just thought that there was more, and that's everybody hated on me for using the first veto that early, but for the PlayStation 1, there's such an incredible library of games that needed to be considered that a game as great as Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, like, it was not... Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 was not worth being the representation of the PlayStation 1 because it's not the best game on the PlayStation 1, period. I even struggle seeing it as the representation of the Dreamcast because there are better games on the Dreamcast. I know Logan will disagree with that.
Dreamcast's a mess, yeah.
Yeah. As somebody who owned a Dreamcast and really enjoyed it and really found a lot out of it, at a time when actually the Dreamcast was being discontinued, is when I got it. I will say that the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is a great game. But what Tetris and I can only really speak to, and like you said, Trevor, this is subjective. I can really only speak to my experience with Tetris Effect. The first time I played the demo of Tetris Effect, I cried. For whatever reason, I was moved to tears by the music, the whale sounds, the neon whales swimming through the darkness of their world, and it was such an incredible moment of it. Honestly, I talk about it, and these parts of the whole don't come up near to the sum of their parts. Because when they're put together in the way that they were for Tetris Effect, and I think that's really what it comes down to, and why I think these two games are actually grouped together, I think, in all of our minds right now, based on kind of where it's at on this list, is these are both games that, broken apart, the parts themselves aren't extraordinarily noteworthy. Whether it's a block game, like a block drop game, or it's a skating game. Oh, it's a soundtrack. Oh, the soundtrack's great. Like, the soundtrack's great. That's fine. Or it's like, all the different mechanics of the game. Like, if you break them all apart, I think that it really comes down to these games being a sum of their parts. These games are put together in a way that make them special. And it's like when, I don't know why I thought of this. There's an old song by Johnny Cash. I forgot what it's called, but it's the song about a guy who worked on a car plant line, like a Chevy plant line. And he decided he was going to make a custom car, and he smuggled out parts from the factory line. And he ended up putting together this this car that just by the time it's done is he built it over 20 years, so the parts are from different eras and everything else, but the car ends up being this crazy fantastic car in the end. And I think that's kind of how these games are, both of these games. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is a sequel. It's a reiteration of its previous game's mechanics, what made that previous game special, and then it improved upon them in many aspects. And honestly, if Frank had said Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1, this would be a very difficult choice for me based off of that. But Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, by virtue of being a sequel, by virtue of not being the first of its iterations, but also on several the reason I was bringing up both of them is because on several aspects, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 falls under its predecessor. And to that point, I would also say that while Tetris Effect has taken a Tetris formula and took it as an incredible part, a part that does in modern gaming doesn't stand out, but it takes the sum of that part, it takes that part and it puts it together with the soundtrack that it does, the backdrops, the environments, the goals, the struggles, even though the last level is an enormous pain, it requires you to utilize every single tool that you've had to do going up to this, and in some really rough ways, as Trevor has attested before.
Sure.
I still think that what it does when it put that together, when it finished the product of what it was, it's something that is not just special. I think in this, once again, this is deeply coming from how it moved me. I find it hallowed. And I understand that that's just from my perspective, and I can't expect other people to find this game to be, the deep spiritual experience that it was for me. But I will also say that Tetris as a game format, as a game type, is more, and once again, this is coming from subjectivity, is more addictive, more engaging, and more challenging than a experiment in physics based engines put to great soundtrack and cool unlockables and replayability. Not to say that either side of those are bad, but I think Tetris does put itself above, or rather further down on our list based off of those factors.
All I'll say is that, I'm tired of this argument, so I'm just going to vote for Pro Skater 2 to be 15, and then we could just make Tetris 14. I'll just say that, obviously nobody else here had even close to an effect that Tetris had on you and Alex O'Neill. I don't understand the effect it had on you and Alex O'Neill. I respect Tetris. I expect what it's done. I expect the impact it's made in the industry. But I've been very clear with the fact that I think Tetris is totally fine and fun. I think it's totally a good series of games, but it is not what I play video games for. It is not the kind of game that I am drawn to video games for. But also, I'm tired of this conversation. So, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 is going to be 15, and we'll just make Tetris 14, and then we're done with it. We don't have to talk about any of these games ever again.
Yeah, I think that's what I was gonna propose as well. Is I think, given for my argument for Tetris Effect over Tony Hawk at this point was going to be kind of twofold. One, we did beat up on Cameron a little bit last week, and so giving him a win here, I think, is at least helping to balance the tide. But then also, I think because he certainly, it being his game of all time, versus nobody cares that passionately about Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, the rest of us or you guys in particular. I think that for me that would give that game the edge a little bit. Is I think just in that it's his best game of all time, so I think that should give a little bit of a nod for the sake of coming up and compiling this list. To give that one. So everybody else good with Frank? I guess you're the only other outlier. You good with that?
I mean, I still definitely want to fight for Tony Hawk, and I think it should be above Tetris on my end still, but I'm outgunned here, so it is what it is.
Fantastic.
Man, when I said I was going to fight more on this episode, I didn't expect it would get this bad.
All right.
This rough on it. Frank, like I said, this is when I vetoed Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, it was not because it's a bad video game or it doesn't deserve to be on our list. And will I go to the mat and fight for every inch, every centimeter I can to put Tetris Effect as far above as whatever I can get it past? Yes, I will.
Oh no, and like I still have thoughts or kind of rebuttals and stuff, but I know we've been going for a long time, and like Logan said, let's just move on and lock it in. So that's where I'm cool with it. Like I'll give up my place on that.
Okay. Then we are going with Tetris Effect at 15 and Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 at 14.
Flip that.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
I was about to say, what the hell?
Oh, the conversation just erupts.
Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 at 15 and Tetris Effect at 14. My apologies. And hopefully we get a little less heated as we dive into whatever's next. And now, like the game is wide open again because I have no idea what we're gonna throw out here as our 13. For me, the game that I still have, the game that is highest still on my list at this point is my own selection of Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic.
Ooh, interesting.
I'm also with you on that.
I love that game and I love what it did. It's one that, just given the timing of when that game came out and whatnot, it's for me it's probably just harder to go back to than I think a lot of the other options we still have available on our list, and I would be less inclined to do that, to go back and sit through a 30-hour Star Wars RPG in that style at this point. So that's kind of what I would put forth as our 13. Any other options out there that people are thinking of?
Well, you know that my perma option, however,
is Wind Waker. I guess
we don't have to go back into that. It's just, we just noticed Cameron's perma option.
It's coming up here before too much longer on my list as well, Wind Waker. So just so we can like gauge the conversation on that, Logan and Frank, how far down the list do you guys have that game?
For me, I have Wind Waker in at 10 because I think it deserves to be at least be in the top 10, but I don't know if it deserves to go much farther than like 11 or I guess I should say 10.
Okay, and how about you, Logan? Where are you sitting at with it?
I have Wind Waker at 12. I'd also say though that I'm totally happy putting Knights of the Republic at 13. I thought that'd be more of a fight for people to make that kind of game higher up on the list. So I'm okay putting that at 13 if you want, and then we can go from there.
Well, can I propose something, however?
Is it going to be Wind Waker related?
It's not. That's
okay,
why
okay.
When I'm the one that said it's my perma option, but, and then it was, know that if anybody wants to put Wind Waker on the chopping block, you have my knife. Regardless. I would probably look at this list, and I'm going to speak from... this is where I get torn, because I do think Knights of the Old Republic is a better game than some of these on this list still. I understand that it's harder to go back to, but I also find that it's modern, like where it's at right now. If you play it on well, we didn't put it on PC, we put it on Xbox. So if we talk about it on the Xbox experience, you can still go back and play it today because of backwards compatibility. But if I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about a question of modern playability, if I'm thinking of a question of where it's at, I would probably say next up on my chopping block that's outside of Wind Waker is Super Mario Galaxy 2. I know that's that's Logan's like deep love of man loves Mario.
It's my favorite Mario game.
Yeah, it's your favorite Mario game on top of that. But I'm putting that out there as like my nomination of next up on the block.
Yeah, so Super Mario Galaxy is my next one as well after KOTOR. My next three are basically KOTOR, Super Mario Galaxy 2, and Wind Waker. That's kind of what I would, if going off of like what's remaining on my list, that's what would round out the 13, 12, and 11 slots. In all three of these games, like being at in the conversation at this point, jives with what I was looking at on this list. That said, like I do look at something like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, and as much as I very much love that game and love kind of the decisions it makes in a 20 years from now kind of thing, I think something like Knights of the Old Republic is probably going to last the test of time better or longer than Hellblade. But that's not necessarily the point of this list, or the purpose of this list. So it's trying to juggle that where I'm like, okay, yeah, like I could see, and that's another one that like falls kind of we're coming up to that point on my list as well. So it's
Man, we're really cutting into like the greatest games of all time.
yeah, that's I mean the conversation here, as I said last week, is like this middle section of the list and specifically figuring out the positioning of it. I think is certainly the
Most
difficulty.
route. I think for me, my three remaining ones that I had were Knights of the Old Republic, Wind Waker, and Mass Effect 2.
Mass Effect
Yeah.
2 that low.
And out of those three, I had Mass Effect 2 the lowest. I had Mass Effect 2 at 13.
Yeah,
But I definitely
That's-
think that's because you haven't like fully played Mass
Sure,
Effect 2 or
but
delved
also,
in, because
like-
I think that's a top 5 game on this list.
I think that's crazy.
I think
I-
that's
not
I
in
think
the top
that's a
five.
top 5 game on this list.
I say it's top
very
10
much disagree.
minimum.
Yeah, top 10. Yeah, but it won't be in the top 5. I think.
Top 5's too tough right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think for me,
we decided for the top 10 our first episode.
Yeah, right. I think for me, like, we have three that people saying Natural Republic is fine for number 13, just as an aside. But B, I think that, yeah, like, Natural Republic and Wind Waker seem like they're going to each get kind of knocked off here in the next 3 games. I obviously think Super Mario Galaxy 2 is a phenomenal game. I think it's a masterpiece. Like, any argument I assume Frank will make for Mass Effect 2, I'll make for Super Mario Galaxy 2. But yeah, I think it's a phenomenal game. I think for me, unquestionably, I think Natural Republic can be the one that we just go to just right off the bat. Because again, Mitra and Frank were all like, all right, that's fine for 13.
yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and just put that in there as 13. I talked about it, extensively when I submitted it, just as like a final piece of the game. I think it definitely, especially in the conversation of Mass Effect 2 specifically, you see so much of where Mass Effect 2 comes from looking at Knights of the Old Republic, and it really was, we talked about it again a few weeks ago when we first talked about Knights of the Old Republic. It set the stage for the kinds of games that BioWare would make, specifically in the Dragon Age and the Mass Effect series.
Yeah.
I think they're starting to stray away from that now with Andromeda and certainly with Anthem. But like that, this as a departure, but still like honoring the spirit of like Baldur's Gate, set that studio on a course that gave them two of like the most iconic trilogies, I think, of all of gaming in the first 3 Dragon Age games and the first 3 Mass Effect games. And so much of that stems from Knights of the Old Republic and what they were exploring and playing with in that series, and kind of like building all the companion relationships that you had in that game, and just also it was an exciting departure for something from Star Wars, where pretty much everything else had been licensed tie-ins, or this was like a nice departure from even the Shadows of the Empire game that I think Cameron had mentioned at the time, like setting it in that same galaxy, far, far away, but like a longer time ago, effectively. Let them still play with all the conventions of Star Wars, but it didn't have all the baggage, good or bad, of kind of setting things within the series of films that we're all familiar with. So I appreciated the risks and the storytelling that they took with that game.
I will say that if it was for the PC version, I'd fight harder for that because of mod capabilities, but I do also want to say that to add on for Trevor, the establishment of KOTOR being the first game, this is also the first game that the team that would then go on to build Mass Effect, this is kind of where they got their start, the actual specific dev team. Drew Caption, who is one of my favorite video game writers of all time, who wrote the story and scenario and dialogue for he was the senior writer on it. But then you also have like a really incredible, like, if anybody out there wants to take a moment to take a look at the people who were behind the making of this game, like the actual, not just the artists, but also the people who worked on dialogue and wrote for this game, it really does have kind of the people who would end up making like the real mark through the Mass Effect trilogy, and also helping out a lot with the Dragon Age trilogy and kind of what it would evolve into. I it pains me to put it at 13 and not higher, but I'm outvoted. So
I mean, I would also say like we are starting to stare down the barrel of like juggernauts.
Yeah, that's also that.
yeah, so but I think that 13 for a game that was on the Xbox, early PC, rough 3D graphics, for it to make it this high on our list is.
It's also we're also saying it's the 13th best game of all time too. Like it's
Yeah.
still very good. I would also then add that I think, and now Cameron can get his moment in the sun potentially here. We're at a moment in time where we might be at Wind Waker's kind of
Yeah, it's interesting because
sunset here.
for me, like I think a couple of us have talked about, like Wind Waker and Mario Galaxy are like, in my opinion, the next two on the chopping block. And
For me, it's Mario
and
Galaxy
for
all
it
day.
to like be Mario versus Zelda here, and not even cracking the top 10 is just like, wow.
Galaxy's gonna make the top 10. Like that's but the game will make the top 10. Like there's so many games that are worse than Galaxy 2 on this list. I think. I would like for starters, like two of us haven't played Portal 2, so then we get into like that conversation. Like I think like because then it's that thing like.
No, I will stand here and say I definitely think Wind Waker deserves to be higher on the list, especially over Mario Galaxy 2 or even Hellblade.
That's the problem, right? Like we're at this point now where it's like, yeah, like I think that like something like Portal 2 for me, we're getting to stuff where like Earthbound is floating around, right? Like I have a lot of these games higher, but when we get into like this point where it's like you're bringing in a big gun, I think in terms of Galaxy 2 being up, but then it's like, well, I think these games are going to be worth it then, right? Like I think for me, like I mentioned before, like Mass Effect or Portal 2 or Earthbound, like Wind Waker for sure. Like these are all games I would have below. Like Galaxy 2 would in like my personal top 5 is maybe there, or worst case would be like number 6 for me personally. And so like we'll get into the point where it's like, yeah, like Trevor just said a second ago, like we're facing the barrel of like juggernauts here, but I think there are 3 or 4 games that I would very kind of clearly point to before we get rid of Super Mario Galaxy 2.
Well, and that's what I would say about Wind Waker, but all the games that you're pointing to are the ones that I'm pointing to about Wind Waker as well, besides Mass Effect, obviously. But I just mean, like, so where's the discussion around some of those games? Like, you're talking about
Yeah,
Earthbound, or you're
like
talking
Portal 2 and
about
Earthbound,
Portal
yeah.
2, like...
Yeah. Like, who else hasn't played Portal 2 other than me?
I have not, but I've watched, like, I've sat through
Sure,
as my
yeah,
roommate
yeah,
played it entire
yeah.
thing.
So
It's funny as hell,
Portal 2 is
but, like, I don't
Trevor's, right?
Yeah.
So can you make your pitch on Portal 2 for me, Trevor?
Yeah, sure. So I have Portal 2, and this is obviously going to be largely driven by taste, but Portal
Sure.
2 for me is not in my it just misses my top 5 personally.
Mhm.
But I have it that high in large part driven by, I think it is one of the best puzzle games ever created. I think it the way it explores physics and the ideas of the puzzles it creates, and it's not that it's just the puzzle game. It's that they put an immense sense of like humor and storytelling behind that puzzle game, and the fun and joy of wandering around as Chell, a very voiceless protagonist in both games. But they kind of expand on her character by giving her like environmental backstory telling in the Aperture Labs. In Portal 2, you have GLaDOS. I think is one of the certainly one of the most iconic characters out of that game. You have the introduction of Cave Johnson and all of his memeable moments, including when life gives you lemons, you make like a lemon grenade. In the conversation of like Portal 2 versus something like Super Mario Galaxy, the reason I have Galaxy lower for my personal list is just largely driven that I don't think Galaxy is even in my top 3 Mario games. I just like I think it was a weaker offering for a Mario title, but it was the one you put forth on the list, and either we had already burned our vetoes at that point, or I didn't care enough to fight it from being on the list. But it's like if the Mario game were a Mario World or Mario 3 or even like the first Mario Galaxy, which I certainly have a slightly better memory of Galaxy, but most of the Wii is just like a blur and a black hole to me at this point. Um, whereas Portal 2, like it just has more iconic puzzling and platforming around that world, and like characters and story, which Mario just doesn't have. And the type of gamer I am at this point, I tend to prioritize story over like just gameplay, and
Mhm.
like even that like just gameplay can be phenomenal. I like it's already gone now, but Tetris Effect on my list was higher than Mario Galaxy or Wind Waker. Um, and that is a purely gameplay experience. But like Mario Galaxy 2's gameplay just didn't do enough in the way of innovating or making like the platforming that much more fun than Galaxy did, than Super Mario 64 did, than Super Mario World did, than Super Mario 3 did. So versus Portal Portal 2, I guess, took the 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 mechanics that they introduced in the first Portal, and then they added in the different gel ideas to kind of fill out their puzzling. Where you've got bouncy gel, you've got gel that like you can run through, and it'll make you go faster, and you have to use those kinds of ideas to solve the different puzzles, and it introduces, I think, more mechanics in a way that Mario Galaxy 2 did not introduce more mechanics. And it is, as we talked about extensively, I think, in the first part of this conversation, it's hard to debate like it's hard to debate the games without also considering the predecessors and how they fit
Mhm.
within their existing series. Um, so like I ultimately Mario is iconic, and if Mario ends up being higher on this list than a Portal, I'm not like they're both amazing games. I
Mhm.
just have almost no interest in going back and playing Super Mario Galaxy at 2 versus like Portal 2, because there's humor and fun writing and fun characters in that game. I would be inclined to go back, and I'm going to be challenged a little bit more, kind of trying to, refigure out those puzzles than a Super Mario platformer, which is pretty much like, okay, I know how to get from point A to point B in this. I know, where to look for in the little nooks and crannies. Portal's gonna like challenge my brain a little bit more as I try, and even if I've gone through and done that whole game and all the puzzles before, I'm gonna look at them, and the way those puzzles are designed, I'm gonna have to like rethink and refigure out, okay, what do I need to do here? Because I'm looking at it with more or less fresh eyes from when I first played it, or when I've like last played some of those later levels. So um, that's why like for me Portal 2 is a higher selection, but I also recognize that like I'm a guy that gave The Witness Game of the Year over Uncharted 4. So um, and that was like that's another one that like that is almost a pure gameplay kind of thing over the best in my opinion Uncharted game. But for where I was at that point in time, and the like I wanted that puzzle game experience over the more kind of expected narrative one I got, and so like Witness was a surprise for me. So it's like I'm thinking of that as I'm thinking of Portal 2. Like I just really enjoy those kinds of puzzle games sometimes. But if I'm alone on that hill, so be it.
I think for me, like to the point you made of, it's interesting to see the Zelda and Mario series in this position. I think that's true. Like I'm a little surprised them both kind of being discussed this slow, but I will also say that because these two series are what they are, I feel like people have kind of personal allegiance to the kind of the games they love, and then the games they don't. they don't have anything really kind of for them, right? Like it's such a broad, diverse series, whether it's Mario or Zelda, that I feel like that almost kind of diffuses the power of the franchise on these kind of lists because everybody can't win, right? We can't have 4 Mario games on the list. We have to have one, and it's probable that in a series like Zelda or Mario, everybody won't like love the game necessarily, like Wind Waker or like Galaxy 2 in this case. But even like if it was Mario 64, if it was Odyssey, if it was God forbid Sunshine or like World or 3
God,
or
no.
literally any Zelda game, it's that thing of I think that kind of takes a bit of the power and punch to them. Ultimately, for me, it's that thing of I think Super Mario Galaxy 2 is Mario at its very best. Like I totally disagree with the notion that it didn't kind of redefine and reinvent what a Mario platforming game is. Like I think the kind of the way that it dealt with gravity and kind of the physics behind that was incredible and like a blast of fresh air to that series. I think it is dripping in a joy and kind of a goofiness and silliness and over the topness that no other Mario game kind of touches for me. I think its winking kind of nods and homages to the past are like perfectly done and not poorly, gratuitously over the top smashing on the head with a fucking hammer like in Odyssey. I think that it is all of the best parts of a Mario game that I love kind of put into one game distilled down. I think it is such a great art style. I think the worlds in that game are consistently among like my favorite of any Mario game. I think the power-ups are consistently among my favorite in the game. And then more than that, like we're in this weird point where it's like, yeah, like I haven't played Portal 2, so I can only speak so much to the game, but I'm very familiar with Portal, obviously, and what the series is and what the game is. And like basically my argument for Portal 2 is pretty simple. It's just like I don't love puzzle games. Like I don't enjoy playing games, be frustrated, right? And like I don't think Portal 2 is necessarily The Witness or something like that caliber, but I don't enjoy the act of playing like puzzle games. This is just purely me speaking now. And so for me, like yeah, like I would like I think you could say a lot about Mario games and throw a lot of things at them, but I think at their kind of core, they are just fun games that kind of put you in a better mood, right? And I think for me at least, like puzzle games just aren't that. In Portal 2, well, I think I would love the writing, where I think I would love the characters probably. If you're asking me, Logan, you have to play one of these two games for a day again or a weekend again or just ever again, what are you going to pick? I would say Super Mario Galaxy 2. But I would also say, to get back to the original point of this conversation, that I think the next game list should still just be The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, because I feel like we're all, at least 2 to 3 of us are already at that kind of point anyway. And now I can go back to I can take my knives and be like, I think Zelda as a whole is just kind of an overrated series. And like, while I think Wind Waker is the one that I would enjoy the most and what I would love the most and the one that like I've been the most excited to play, I still think that as a whole, the series just has a lot of problems. Cameron, I'm sure, is giddy to talk about all the issues with Wind Waker as he's done before, but we don't need those
that
again.
We don't need that. No, I don't want to go into that again.
Yeah, but I think that for me at least, that seems like kind of the not logical next game to go to anyway. Is Legend of Zelda Wind Waker for 12.
Well, so the reason that Wind Waker was given a brief reprieve for me to go talk about Portal 2 was Frank wanted Frank has Wind Waker higher, and so
Yeah.
I would say as it was Frank's pick on the list, I guess go ahead, Frank, and make your case. Like there's some stuff I want to come back to on Super Mario Galaxy. The main argument I would want to make seemed to be driven by, and this came up a lot in the first conversation we had around Mario Galaxy when you submitted it, is that you, going back to your argument of like Tony Hawk 1 versus Tony Hawk Pro 2, like specifically we're talking about 2, and 2 does nothing to innovate, or almost nothing to innovate, like on the Galaxy 1, and so much of your argument was built around what Galaxy 1 innovated on, but we'll circle back to that so we can talk
before
about.
we move.
Okay.
Before we move on from Portal, I'd like to just say that as somebody who I detest puzzle games. I don't like them. They are not fun to me. I do not like them. Yet my favorite. Anyway, I even argue that Tetris isn't actually a puzzle game, but that's aside. the writing and the characterization and the story of Portal 2, I didn't play it. My roommate who does enjoy puzzle games was playing it at the time, and he played through that entire thing in like 2 days, and I was there for most of that because that game is so goddamn funny. If you were to ask me, Cameron, what's the funniest game of all time, I would probably have to say Portal 2. Because it's not just jokes, it's like a combination of the dark humor of corporate disregard combined with J.K. Simmons monologues and diary entry, like audio diary entries, the revelation about GLaDOS and Wheatley and the terribly horrific things that were done to both of them, like the everything that goes that's through where Portal 1 was about getting cake at the end of the game, and the idea that like the cake was a lie, but the cake anyway. The point being is that Portal 2 took something that was kind of like a cool physics experiment and increased it to levels of storytelling and enjoyment that even somebody like me was willing to sit and watch somebody figure out puzzles, which is possibly like the most boring time you could have outside of watching grass grow or paint dry, that you could have. So I will say Portal 2, just on that level of storytelling, does put it above the other two games for me. I will say this, for me, 12, Wind Waker, 11, Mario Galaxy 2, 10, Portal 2. That's where I'm locking things in. So I will now sit down, and the remaining time I give to you gentlemen. Feel free.
Let's throw it back over to you, Frank. Make the case for why Wind Waker should last a little bit longer, I guess.
I mean, as I said before, I definitely think it nails the whole like adventure, just aesthetic and vibe of like you're a kid who just has lived his entire life on this small island, and it literally just starts with you waking up in your treehouse, and adventure begins, and you end up going on to save the entire world, and kind of finding out that that's been kind of your part of your entire ancestry almost, or just there's been other heroes in the past that you may be tangentially related to. And I also love though that like that island is there the entire time you're playing. You can go back home whenever. You can talk to your family. You can get soup that'll heal you. Like there's all this stuff built into the game where I would even say that is like where would something like Mario Galaxy doesn't have some of these elements that I think like I get it's kind of an adventure, you're going through space, but kind of like Trevor was saying, I don't think it iterates at all going from 1 into 2. And if anything, it's just kind of they bleed together. And like you were saying, you're kind of unfamiliar with where it even happened in between which one. And I don't know if it necessarily has that same adventure aesthetic that I get from Wind Waker. And then for me personally, like even as Trevor mentioned, I just don't really have the interest to go ever and back and play Galaxy 2 or even, some of those other games like that. And where I do want to replay Wind Waker, I have already, and I do want to play it again, and I want to go back and check out this HD version on Wii U that I nominated here. And I think it nails a lot of the things that just Super Mario Galaxy necessarily doesn't have, and I definitely think it has a sense of adventure and fun that, you may not necessarily get.
Now, Frank, can I ask you something?
Yes.
Would you have Portal 2 below both these other games?
That's tougher. I also, as it's been talked about, I don't love puzzle games, but I do love some of the writing in that game, and I would put it below. I'm okay with it below Wind Waker, honestly, but I don't know if I'm okay with it or with Super Mario Galaxy. I don't know if it was Super Mario Galaxy. If like I guess what I'm saying is my order would be maybe like Mario, Portal, Wind Waker.
So we're at a point now where
we are at an impasse, gentlemen. I do agree with the point that Logan brought up earlier that while I appreciate like your defense of it, Frank, I think the other three of us having Wind Waker ready to go at this number 12 spot, I think that probably locks it in at number 12. So now it sounds like it's coming in between Portal 2 and Galaxy 2.
I mean, if this is the case, then I definitely put my vote behind Galaxy 2 next.
We're at this point now where it's like, it's gonna be like I realistically I think it's gonna be Wind Waker's gonna be 12, Galaxy 2 is gonna be 11, and then it sounds like Portal 2 is gonna be 10 for most of us, which is on the next episode. But like, I feel like we're at the point where like Frank's gonna be the only guy who argues for when it could be higher. I'm gonna be the only guy who argues for Galaxy 2 to be higher. And then this also kind of proves my point of like why these two franchises are also kind of cursed in some way to be that high on the list, because it's just hard to find a game that everyone loves.
Yeah.
Without being like, yeah, but my favorite game is this kind of thing. There's a tricky series to nail down, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that works for me. If we're good with that, a Wind Waker, Galaxy 2 to close out this episode, and then we'll probably start off next week with Portal 2. And it is, I think you hit the nail on the head right there, Logan, of like other games in these franchises in other lists are probably going to rank higher. I think for our particular list, I don't think any of us really have that like really truly deep-seated Zelda love or Mario love even. Like there are certainly important games in all of gaming and foundational building blocks for what we've seen and what we have elsewhere on these lists. But I think for just who the four of us are, especially Cameron, who's been trying to kill Wind Waker since the beginning,
Day one.
If I had known that Frank would have suckered me in by getting me to veto Pro Skater, and not that I could have gone back and gotten if only I had known.
Yeah. I think it is very much like these series are so vast at this point that everybody's going to have their own favorites, and when you have that, it's going to become it's harder to find a consensus over. I think a lot of the series that remain on the list past this point are smaller in nature and don't have as many options to choose from, and when they do, there tends to be like a very clear front runner or two in the conversation. Whereas, as like I said, like Galaxy, like if I'm ranking Mario games myself, and specifically sticking to platformers, so not bringing in like Legend of the Seven Stars, Super Mario RPG into the mix, and Paper Marios and stuff. Like, yeah, I would say, like, I would put probably Odyssey, Mario 3, Mario World, Mario 64, and even the first Galaxy over Galaxy 2, just because it hit at a point where I had put my Wii away. I didn't really, or like, I played through it, but it was in the death throes of the Wii's era, and so it's just one that, for that time of my life, it didn't resonate. And whereas, like, Logan, you're 7 years younger than me, like, it probably hit at, like, the prime time for you to be playing a Mario game like that. So I absolutely understand why you would have it higher and why you picked it. It just, like, it does speak to where those other, Mario games are in my formative experience.
Yep. Well said. I think we got our 5 then.
All right. So yeah, that's going to round out this episode. Our 15 through 11, which I'm sure some people are going to be super pissed with. Are number 15, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Number 14, Tetris Effect. Got it right that time. Number 13, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Sorry, Brandon Gann. I'm glad you appreciated me adding that to the list at the end. And thank you always for all the shout-outs, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. Yeah.
The homie.
Number 12, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, much to Cameron's chagrin. And number 11, just missing our top 10, Super Mario Galaxy 2. So, yeah, that's gonna do it.
That's the bottom.
This has been a very, very heated conversation.
We've nailed down a top 10, though.
We have, we've got our top 10 games to come in the future.
Well, to be fair, we eliminated somebody's favorite game of all time.
We did, yeah. Sorry.
So, like, that was going to happen. Like, I knew at some point Tetris Effect was going to get up on that. Like, I even offered it on the chopping
block. But it also,
last
like,
week, but...
it's your favorite game of all time, but it also didn't, like, you knowing the game, I guess, like, you didn't bring it out until round 5. So...
I was worried that somebody might... I was worried about, like, people vetoing it after, like, just all the crap that I got from vetoing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. I was worried it was going to backlash and get my favorite game of all time vetoed, and that was just going to hurt me really badly.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
I was trying to keep it safe.
Yeah.
It's the one baby I didn't want to kill, and you tore it from my arms and threw it in the pot to make this list.
I think that's also you're playing to the crowd you have before you here, and we're not like this isn't a panel of you and Alex O'Neill too. To be fair, like it's like most people didn't.
There's
have the
more than
effect
just
that
two
Tetris Effect-
people who love
No,
Tetris Effect.
no.
that
I'm not
much.
arguing that, but I'm saying like the effect it had on you two, I think is fairly unique compared to everybody else who's played the game. Is all I would argue.
That's-
it's
that's
the
entirely
effect it had on like that. I think profound of an effect, and so it's playing to that tune and be like, again, it's also thinking like we did just say it's the 14th best game of all time. So like
That's true.
we're all like splitting hairs and like all of these games are getting very good praise, right? Like it's like they're very very good games.
Yeah.
They are.
Well, great. It sounds like we'll probably kick off next week with Portal 2 as a spoiler for for anybody joining us next week. And then we'll have 4 more games. It sounds like to get down to number 6, and then we will land at the top 5. It's going to be another exciting week next week. Thank you guys again for joining me this week. It's going to do it for this episode. Let's go around the table and shout out all the things we want to shout out. You can follow Logan at LeftyLogie. Anything you want to plug or shout out, Logan?
Yeah, you can go check out the newest episode of That Wanna Be Film Class. We talked about Inception 2 weeks ago. It was really great. We talked about Mad Max Fury Road last week. That movie, or when we record this anyway.
Yep.
That movie is real good. That is a really fantastic movie. And then this upcoming week, Ben's nominee is going to be the one, the only, Paddington 2, because of course Ben had to get it on as quickly as possible. I've actually never seen Paddington 2 before, so I'm actually pretty excited to check it out and to find out how I think it actually is. So you can go check all of that out. You can, of course, go check out That Nerdy Site Show. And then I was sick the last 4 or 5 days, so my Mr. Rogers review of Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood was delayed. But hopefully we will definitely have that live this week that you're listening to this. And hopefully in the next day or two that'll go up and be on the site. It's all ready to go, just to be put up there.
Cool. You can follow Cameron at RevCabits, 2 B's, 2 T's. How you doing, Cameron?
I just want to take a moment though to say, Logan, I love you.
That's good.
You are a dear friend, and despite you getting me so angry, I had to step away from the mic. I want you to know that does not impact the way that I see you as a beautiful human being, and I love you.
Yeah, I think to be very clear, again, these are 4 best friends all talking about video games. Like,
Yeah, none of this is
part of
like
being
personal attacks or anything like that.
yeah, part of being a best friend is getting into like dumb heated arguments over silly nonsense, right? Like it's like whether it's what is the best video game between this and this, whether it's like what are the weeks, like being best friends is about loving each other unconditionally, supporting each other, and also get into really dumb, silly arguments. And like, yes, I have nothing but the most love and respect for you, Cam.
All right.
I adore you.
Thank you. That being said, I was on this past
Being
episode.
said, fuck Tony Hawk.
No, that being said, I was on the latest episode of That Nerdy Podcast. I don't think that's what it's actually called.
That Nerdy Site Show.
That Nerdy Site Show, that's what it is. I should know it. I'm on it. I'm on that latest episode. I have some reviews that are forthcoming. I've been delayed greatly, mostly by the fact that I have been in the process of moving. It has been a long and arduous process. By that I mean it's been the last few days, and it has wrecked my body on a physical level. So, but yeah, no, I'll have some reviews out soon. Also, love my new digs. Should have a vlog about it that I'm going to be doing soon. I probably won't go out for a little while.
Cool. Thank you, Cameron. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes.
Oh yeah, and the only thing I guess I want to plug right now too is that there should be a Chicken Horse Let's Play going up pretty soon. I should guess.
Yeet.
I sent over the updated version, so hopefully that'll be kind of the finished one, and so that should be hitting the YouTube page pretty soon.
Very cool.
Very excited.
You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. Kind of following up on what Logan was plugging, since this episode will be going out the day after the Paddington 2 episode goes live. It should be announced by then that I'm going to be on the month-end episode of That Wanna Be Film Class this month, and we're going to be talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
So excited.
One of my favorite movies of all time. And I'm very excited to be joining the team for the first time as the first kind of guest to discuss that one. So check that out next week, because that's going to be fun. I could talk alone about that movie.
Yeah, we've
for,
talked a lot about this movie
for hours and hours and hours. So I look forward to discussing it with the 3 of you guys. So yeah, check that out. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site. Please, especially as we are still in our first couple months here, support us by liking, rating, subscribing, following us everywhere you can. Like I said at the top of the show, we are very close to reaching the 100 subscriber threshold on YouTube. So if you can help us get there, that would be very much appreciated. And if you are feeling extra generous, of course, we would always love your support over at Patreon, patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you again, guys, for joining me for this more heated episode than I think we've had before, but good conversations. So, yeah, thank you guys for joining. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And as always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.